So hello to everyone in our program today. We are glad to present our new guest. It's Fred Hoffman, is an assistant professor of intelligence studies. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for your time for our program. And sure, you have a huge experience in all the matters of intelligence services. And I want to ask you your observation of what's going on now in Ukraine, because we understand that even if we have Russians have failures on the battlefield, it doesn't mean that they have the same failures in the rear. And it's not only about Ukraine. It's their destructive activities around the world, in not only even Europe. I think in the United States suffering from this too. So how globally they're working, they're active right now, and what instruments they still have and can use, even though there are a lot of sanctions and a lot of restrictions, and everyone is looking at Russia at the microscope, actually.
One of the biggest problems is Russian disinformation. And what disinformation is, there's two terms. There's disinformation and there's misinformation. Misinformation is you unintentionally disseminate information that's not true. Disinformation is a different thing. It's where you intentionally disseminate false information to create a desired effect. And the Russians have inherited this competency from Soviet times. And if you look at Vladimir Putin is a former lieutenant colonel in the KGB. In fact, he was in Dresden as a Soviet intelligence officer. I was in West Berlin as an American intelligence officer at the same time. So I didn't know about Putin at that time. I don't think any of us really did. But the bottom line was he belonged to an organization that dedicated 25% of their resources to creating disinformation stories. KGB officers were required to spend 25% of their time proposing disinformation stories that could be used. That's how much effort that the KGB had put into disinformation. And it tells you something about Putin's lineage and his thinking about disinformation. For him, this was part of his really his socialization process. It's part of who he is. Another component to Russian disinformation is authoritarian regimes are really idealized or they're optimized to create disinformation. Because think about it. You've got one man at the top of the pyramid. I consider Russia more of a authoritarian state, and even though they have the trappings of democracy, it's not really a democratic state. But you have one guy at the top that says, okay, here's what we're going to do, and everybody goes out and executes. We in the West are at a disadvantage because we're not set up like that. We're liberal democracies, and people are encouraged to voice their opinions. But here's the danger of disinformation from Russia. First of all, it's cheap. Second of all, it's no negative consequences for them, really. I mean, if they disseminate lies and the lies are proven, so what? Okay, so there's no negative consequences. It's cheap. And over time, it's like it eats away at our societies like we're an iceberg. And it melts away slowly at credibility of legitimate news sources and credibility of the government. That's the long-range intent of disinformation. So whatever's going on in the battlefield, I mean, the Russians are not doing well. I think once the Ukrainian armed forces break through the initial line of defense and get into their rear area, they're going to be in a world of hurt. But the thing is, this disinformation capability is separate from that, and they can, with minimal resources, really, okay, they can continue to do things against the West.
You just said that everybody knew that Putin is a former KGB officer, but I think there are no former. Once you're KGB officer, you till the death, you call a KGB officer. And you just said that everybody knows that the activity of such structure was all about disinformation. And for me, it's interesting when politicians of the democratic countries really understood what's going on, and not in Ukraine, I mean, in the field of disinformation. Because Russia today, that was spreads their propaganda and disinformation around the world, have been working for a long, long period of time. And I was surprised turning on the television somewhere in a European country and heard all this, can't even intelligent words to get to say what I heard. And especially when the historians from different countries were disinformative in the field of history even, and people in Europe will listen to this during years. So when was this period? I don't think it's the last year when the full-scale invasion started. When?
Well, if you want to talk about disinformation, its origins, it goes back 100 years. And the bottom line is it's technology driven. Disinformation was already used by the Soviets, and quite frankly, Western European countries used it as well during the Cold War. The 1950s was a period of time when we did it as well, okay? But the thing is, we kind of got away from that to a large extent, and the Soviets, by contrast, they amped it up. So, you know, when you go back to the 1930s and the Nazis and the Soviets, I mean, they suddenly had, you know, mass media, they had radio, they had the newspapers, and they effectively propagandized people. Now, propaganda is different from disinformation. I get that. But the bottom line is technology enables it. So in an internet world that we live in today, it's even more of a problem because now it's one thing to deceive people, but now you can deceive systems. You can go on to automated systems. You can create the Internet Research Agency like Prigozhin had in St. Petersburg, right? So you've got a building full of people that entire building and the people in it cost less than a stealth fighter, right? So to give you a sense of the cost effectiveness of systems like that, right? So these people not only propagate individually a message, they use bots, they use automated systems to widely disseminate. And what ends up happening is people are inundated with these messages. And here's the thing about disinformation. It's not that they want you to believe the lie. What they want to do is they want to create so many conceivable explanations for an event that you don't know which one to choose from. Only one is the truth. But if there's 30 that are out there competing with the truth, what do you do?